Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, July 31st, 2026. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary, here with our special mailbag episode. And joining me to answer your questions, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And our podcast producer, Noam Blum. Hi, Noam.
Hi, John.
So Noam joined Commentary, 6 months ago? I can't even remember now.
6 months ago.
6 months ago. And he is our chief technical officer and is the person who runs our podcast and helps us on social media and makes us sound good and all of that, and is also co-sanguineous with me. So we're going to start with, Noam, a question that only you can answer, which is, somebody wants to know, where on earth did this go? The interstitial sounds on the podcast, that little piece of music, if you are listening to the podcast audio, doing the audio version. Where did this come from? And our reader says, given my proclivities, surely it must come from a Broadway show or a TV theme song. But neither. But so let's see how the sausage is made. Why did we do it, and what is it?
Well, I wish I had a more interesting answer than it came from some sort of sound library, but that's a consequence of the reality of rights management and where and when you can use copyrighted material. I think the listener who sent the email was correct that was the line of thinking when I was trying to figure out a little transition sound to the ads. I've been working on making the ads a little easier to listen to. I added music beds to the ads, and I add these little transition sound effects. But it was my thought process while scanning through this infinite sound library was to try to find something that captured the vibe of old TV shows or Broadway musicals. I know that is kind of your vibe, John, and I thought it would work well. I think that there were some that I had to reject simply because they created a ridiculous situation where you would say something very terrible and it would be followed by a ta-da-ta, into commercial. And so it needed to be something that did not have that vibe, but was also still sort of interesting and sort of fun to listen to.
Right. I think we were concerned because if people, I'm sure, note when they listen that until we started doing this a couple months ago, it would literally be Seth saying, and that's what's wrong with the way they're talking about Netanyahu. And then with a half a second break, it would be like, let me tell you about Advertiser X. No. Like with no sound, no sense that there was, or it would happen in the middle of something I was saying. And then it was like the next word was an ad, but there was no way of noting the transition. And I have to say that I borrowed this idea, or I thought of this idea because I was impressed at how they did it at the Ringer Podcast Network, which produces sports and pop culture podcasts, and now is on Spotify. And they've been working hard to also create this gap to make it sound like the ads and the podcasts are a little bit different, and so we're happy that you notice. I think it has made the podcast better. Okay, let's go to some more serious questions. So a wonderfully named Doghouse Riley asks the following: on a political probability scale of 0 to 10, with 0 meaning zero probability and 10 meaning metaphysical certitude. This is a scale invented by John McLaughlin on the McLaughlin report, thus indicating that Doghouse Riley is as old as I am. How likely is it that Trump will declare an emergency of some kind as an excuse to alter or cancel the 2028 election? So, Seth, Abe, who wants to take this on? How likely, on a scale of 1 to 10, is Trump?
If it's 0 to 10, right? Which
Yeah.
you put in the email, then my answer is 0.1. because I'm inclined to say 0, but on the principle of never say never. I would say that we'll go with point one. I just don't think it's likely at all. I don't want to leave out the possibility of it, and I know that there's some language in there that could go either way. I mean, alter the elections. I don't know what we can fit under that umbrella, and whether something he's going to do about mail-in votes or something like that might qualify. So I'm going to put a positive tenth of a percentage on the positive tenth of a point on the board to cover those possibilities.
I think it's unlikely, slightly more likely than Seth thinks. I'd say it's about a 4. Excuse me.
A 4? That's
sure.
pretty high. Okay.
Well, the thing is, what I think is much closer to metaphysical certitude is that there will be a not insignificant group of people who claim he has done this either way. And there will also have been things that Trump will have done that are fishy and unappealing, but not exactly what we're talking about. So it's all going to be much muddier. Is my point. And I just think he's always been unpredictable, and he's now perhaps more unpredictable than ever. So that's right. But I don't think it's likely.
Look, I think it's an important point that basically since the 2000 election, every election in the United States has been contested. First of all, the 2000 election was contested because of actual facts on the ground about the bizarre results in Florida and the problem with the butterfly ballot in Palm Beach County and the hanging chads and the 36 days of indecision about who actually won Florida and therefore won the presidency. But in 2004, questions were raised about Kerry in Ohio and whether the Ohio polls had been closed too early, and Bush won because he won Ohio, and Christopher Hitchens was a big 2004 elections truther. 2008, I guess, didn't really have much. 2012 had a little bit because of this question of whether or not someone had interfered with the Republican Orca vote gathering machine. 2016, of course, Trump said, Democrats said that Russia won the election for Trump, and Cambridge Analytics had won it through Facebook for Trump. And then, Trump said he'd actually won, and that 3 million votes had been stolen against him in California. And then 2020, obviously, he contested that election. And so this is just a feature of our politics. I would give this a 1 to 2. On the question of whether or not he finds some lunatic like John Eastman who can explain to him how he can get over the constitutional amendment that says that a president is only limited to 2 terms by saying something like, no, it's consecutive term. So you don't have a consecutive term, so you could have a 3rd term or something like that. But that would happen, of course, before the election. If he were really to start mucking around with things in that lunatic way, which I don't think is entirely beyond the bounds of probability, given who he is, that would obviously have to be resolved before November of 2028. And then of course, if Republicans win and Democrats lose, Democrats will come up with some truth or theory about how Republicans stole the election, which I think is Abe's point. If Trump isn't a nominee, or it doesn't somehow contrive to do this, I don't think he'll care enough, to be honest. Après him le déluge. He doesn't care. He doesn't care who's going to win. I mean, he'll want to be given credit for having gotten somebody elected, but otherwise I don't think he cares enough to play that game. All right. For aspiring essay writers, Caleb Loudon asks, whom would you recommend they read, and what specific essays should they read? So aspiring essay writers. So what essays do you guys think are like lessons in how to write and formulate and produce an essay?
Geez, I always, to be honest, I always go back to commentary. I just go back and back and back. The archives are so vast, so rich, And there's always something amazing and sort of they that you never saw in there again. They wouldn't expect to have seen in there. And you can almost just pick a year at random. I mean, honestly, I do this regularly, and I'm sort of always rewarded. I'm really having a hard time thinking of a specific essay because there's so many different types of good essay writing. That you can be delighted or shocked or dazzled, or you can have a revelation strike you, and all those will happen if you go through the commentary archives. I wish I could be more. Maybe as you guys talk, I could think of something more specific, but that's where I am.
Seth, do you have anything?
Yeah, I tried to think of answers to this question not in commentary, just because for obvious reasons. But yes, you should read commentary, and I assume probably people listening, many of them do. But I just figured outside of commentary, I'd give it a shot, and one of the names that I would give them is Patrick Radden Keefe. He writes mostly for the New Yorker, but he wrote a book called Say Nothing about the IRA's disappearance policy of making people disappear, and it was made into a very good Hulu show and whatever. But he normally, these books of his spring from an essay or an essay idea in the New Yorker. And he does have a book of a collection of like 12 of his essays. So you can get a flavor of what he did. The book is called Rogues, but it's just about different personalities and people he's profiled. But it's just very, very. It's excellent. He's an excellent writer, and somebody who writes nonfiction with and keeps the tension as if it's fiction. And so that's a good indication of somebody who reads a lot. A writer who reads a lot. I would also say, I find that when it comes to personal stuff, Caitlin Flanagan does a wonderful job also. She's written about her experience battling cancer. She's, written about all these sort of personal things, and she manages to fold it into her wider story, and therefore not be like, this is what she's known for, writing about this sad thing that happened to her or something like that. There's a way she manages to weave in life wisdom without sounding corny. She's funny. She manages to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that can come up when you write about personal stuff. So I would say, those two, outside of commentary, those two are good places for those specific kind of essay writing.
So I just go to George Orwell, who is the greatest essayist probably in the English language as an essayist, as the master of the form of the essay. And we're talking about essays short, essays long, essays polemical, essays descriptive, essays repertorial, essays personal. The book that I literally read the covers off, and that disintegrated in my hands as a teenager and as a young writer in my 20s, was the 4-volume collection of Orwell's collected essays and letters, which and book reviews and things like that. 4 volumes, and he died at the age of 46. So it should give you an example of just how incredibly prolific he was. And, there are, 10 of those famous essays. Shooting an Elephant, which was about literally growing up in India and going on an expedition to shoot an elephant. Such Were the Days, which is about his time being hazed and tormented at an English boarding school. Politics in the English Language, which is one of the sort of source materials for 1984 about the misuse, how the language is used and misused for political ends and aims. Inside the Whale, which is about writing about sex and censorship. And you just go on and on and on, and he was he was the master of all forms of essay. And so that's if you're an aspiring essayist and you don't read Orwell, your aspirations will not be fully fulfilled. Noam, do you have anything on this? Is there an essayist you enjoy particularly, or is that not your?
I don't know. I was not sent these questions ahead of time,
That's true.
unfortunately, so I did not. You're catching me off guard. I think you're.
None of us were sent the questions ahead of time. We're all doing this off the cuff, off the top of our heads, Noam.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll move on from that. That's okay. This is something we can all answer, but Noam, maybe you start here. So, will commentary advise and advocate for its readers and podcast listeners to participate in a counter demonstration supporting Israel when Netanyahu comes to New York City for the UN General Assembly? So, do you support a counter demonstration?
Well, I mean, Mayor Mamdani recently said that protest was the spirit of New York or something along those lines. So I'm sure he would welcome such a counter protest, I'm sure. I do think that it's important to have some kind of counter presence. I know that the anti-Israel crowd are going to be out in force because that's what they do. And they've been egged on by the mayor to participate in these. And to some extent, I think that the presence of pro-Israel counter-protesters will help show exactly what are the real motives of these protests, and they tend to bring out the more ugly side of them, and they're sort of they let their masks slip more when the people that they hate are standing right in front of them. And so I do think it's important. I just hope that people stay safe. I know that, the idea of standing there in the midst of this throng is scary and requires a lot of courage to do, especially in these days where I feel like the safety of people who express these kinds of opinions are in greater peril in New York. So I would say yes, but also stay safe.
All right. So you got? Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were going to go around, but that's fine.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for me, it's like I think I have to settle this question for myself still, because I personally don't like protests of any sort. But to Noam's point, when I see the pro-Israel counter-protesters out there, I'm always extraordinarily heartened. And I'm very happy that they're there. So, yes.
I don't like them, and I don't like going to them, and I don't. This is I'm the opposite of Mamdani, as I think I said when he said bedrock of New York City is protest. The bedrock of the United States is the opposite of protest. It is involvement in the political process, not standing out in the street yelling. I mean, you can do that. That's free speech, but that is not the bedrock of our system. However, I think back to a moment right before October 7th in 2023, when a left-wing peacenik Jew of my acquaintance in New York organized a protest against Bibi Netanyahu at the UN because of the judicial reforms that his government was advocating. And I was so outraged, not by the idea that there could be a protest against the judicial reforms in Israel, but that they would do this at the epicenter of global Jew hatred and anti-Semitism, that they would do it when the Prime Minister of Israel was coming to represent the Jewish state, nominally Zionist. This crew, this was not Jewish. This was not Jewish Voice for Peace. This was not, this was a sort of liberal Jewish American Jews who would call themselves Zionists, and that they were joining the jackals effectively at the UN by having this protest at the UN. And I think of that, and then I think, yeah, maybe there need to be counter protests, because there will be some kind of fake Jewish protest which is to say there will be a Jewish group that, of course, is made up of 85% of non-Jews standing in front of the UN saying, as a Jew, I want Bibi Netanyahu to be arrested for war crimes. And if that isn't countered, this mythological notion that Jews believe that Israel is a terrorist state will gain more and more purchase. So
yeah, and on that note, just Jews are in a specific position because we really are the only minority that does this to ourselves. There isn't, there really weren't like George Floyd counter protests, from it's just, I mean, there might have been from right wingers, but there were or protests against the some of the rules that they were trying to put in place, or maybe on behalf of, or defending the police or whatever. But we were kind of the only group that does this. That like when there's something going on with anti-Semitism, the Times or the Washington Post or somebody, they have people to call, and so there will always be a part in the story where it says, "But some Jews are worried that cracking down on this may crack down on free speech and may curb this, blah, blah, blah." I saw somebody wrote a column. My favorite example of this ever recently was somebody wrote a column saying that it's Jewish history teaches you that you should not target the ICC. That Rubio is wrong because you should protect the ICC for Jews. And it is right now an institution that is obsessed only with harming Jews. So, I do think like, I'm not a big protester or counter protester, but I do kind of feel like, along John's point, that I like people to see, if they can, that, there's it's very easy for the other side to organize Jews in service of the Tsar. And there should be Jews opposed to the Tsar also wherever there are Jews in service of the Tsar.
Excellent. Okay. Susan Schwartz asks the following. Watching anti-Israel, anti-Semitic narratives and violence spreading like a wildfire here and around the world, can you name individuals or organizations today that you are seeing out there who could possibly have the courage and the leadership qualities to be the Jewish Churchill or the not Jewish Churchill for the Jews? So is there I don't quite know what she means by Churchill, and I have an interesting thing to say about Churchill, but do you see a sort of world historical figure emerging in somewhere in the world who could be a Churchill arguing for the civilizational importance of the Jews and the Jewish state that would transcend current political divisions?
I don't know. I sort of feel like that's not how anti-Semitism is ultimately countered, with like one leader that marshals the forces. I would like to see someone try. That's for sure. I'd applaud them. And there are many great, there are wonderful people out there who are taking up the cause. But I don't think this mania subsides because one person comes out and roars like a lion in our defense. It's a much more complicated process that plays out, sadly.
Yeah, I think Abe is right. I think in years past, the communication atmosphere was such that there was space for one big voice to come in and fill the discourse with good arguments. Today, because everything is so flooded, there's so many people with so many platforms, I think it's more important to create a totality of voices, to create this sort of space where you hear if you browse through your social media feed, you see multiple people making the good arguments as opposed to just one person, to sort of stake a claim in the information space for these good arguments. So I think it's less about one big person and more about multiple good people that you see out there, content creators and other people who help create the impression with third-party observers that it is not just that everyone feels a certain way and that way is anti-Israel in this case.
Go ahead, Seth. Sorry. Did you have something?
Oh, I
Okay,
thought Abe started to say something.
I was just going to say, also, Zelensky is the Jewish Churchill.
Oh, okay. Well, what's interesting about that is that's why I wanted to bring this up is I'm going to go totally off to one side. And of course, people worship Churchill and more than ever, and anyone who appreciates the extraordinary position that Zelensky has taken. He is a little like Churchill in the sense that when Churchill became prime minister of Great Britain, after the Hitler's invasion of Poland and in 1940, there was a real question about whether England would survive. And remember his speech, the Dunkirk speech that made him famous, is envisions an invasion of Great Britain by Germany. We will fight them on the beaches. We'll fight, and we will never surrender. It was not a given thing that Britain was going to win the war and survive. It could just be France and be swallowed up the way France was. And so, that was a very noble, clarion call for and rallied his people and all of that. But, I wanted to mention this because I was listening to The Rest is History, the podcast, wildly popular podcast with not the actor Tom Holland, but the historian Tom Holland and a colleague whose name I can't quite remember right now. And, this is a fascinating structure of this podcast because it's basically these two guys who simply talk about a historical event or a historical period as though they are like color commentators during a game. They tell the story and they trade details and they trade back and forth. They're just storytellers. And they put out one of the greatest 2-part, 3-part podcasts I've ever heard about the disaster in World War II at Gallipoli, the 1915 fantasy.
World War One, you mean?
World War One. I'm sorry. Which was this unimaginable defeat for Britain and Australia and New Zealand on the Turkish coast. Colossal casualty number, most of them Australian, and this was all Churchill's plan. And the idea, if you had told people in 1916, with Churchill disgraced because of what had happened at Gallipoli, that he would emerge 25 years later to be the savior of Western civilization, they would have thought you were insane. He had been the most reckless, foolish, and boneheaded and wrong-thinking military strategist the world had ever seen, based on what happened at Gallipoli. And therefore, it's important to remember how contingent history is, and how if you can't draw a straight line, there could be people right now that we look at and think are lost forever and bozos and ridiculous and deserve to be written out of public life, who could emerge 25 years from now as the saviors of the United States and the West. So you got to sort of like keep your powder dry. The great version of this story is Ariel Sharon, driven out of Israeli politics after the Sabra and Shatila massacres in 1982, and emerging 18 years later after having been disgraced as the prime minister of Israel, something again that no one would ever have in a million years have expected would happen after he had been sort of driven from public life. Okay.
So you're saying there's hope
yeah.
for Jackson Hinkle yet?
Oh man. No, I guess Eli would say there's hope for Laura Loomer yet, given Eli Lake's piece on Laura Loomer, but I'm not willing to go there. Okay, a couple of questions on politics in 28. Can you see a non-Vance and non-Rubio candidate winning the GOP nomination in 28? And Noam Taylor writes, I'm a 22-year-old Orthodox Jewish conservative. If Rubio doesn't run, who is best suited to take on Vance and stand for actual conservatism, American global leadership, limited government, and a strong defense of capitalism? So, anybody have a scenario for 28 that does not involve Rubio and Vance?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're too far out from 2028 to think that the status quo will remain the status quo. And in this case, it very well might be, and it is hard to see options outside of it. But I really do think that we're so far out that I think it depends also how the midterms go, because I could see if Mike Rogers wins the Michigan Senate seat, I could see an immediate boost to his prospects as a guy who takes up that torch. He believes in, a strong American presence in the world. And if he proves that he can win in a state you have to win, in a swing state, and if he wins, if El Sayed wins the Democratic nomination and Mike Rogers wins the general, Mike Rogers will have won this general election based on the idea that there is this threat to America and we're going to stop it. And so all those things might converge. And then, the two who are always around are, Tom Cotton could always run. And he's a guy, I mean, we say that all the time, but he's a guy who could unite the different branches. And then lastly, I'm not sure that Mike Pence has given up, running. He has put together his own think tank. And it seems like it might be a sort of movement or campaign in waiting. We'll see.
Remember that, Trump came down the escalator in June of 2015. So the analogy there would be June of 2027. And we thought, my God, this is an amazing field that is lining up for 2016. Look at this. You have these two 40-year-old senators, Cruz and Rubio, really remarkably accomplished. You had governors. You had just this sort of, Jeb Bush, and you had, you had just 12 plausible people in the world of plausibility, as 2015 appeared to be. And then they were just wiped away, in 6 months, by this X factor. I don't know who that X factor is or could be.
John Fetterman.
Now? Well, I don't think that could happen because he's too much of a Democrat. But and that's a weird, right? I mean, that's like a.
I'm half joking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's back to it's like a thrilling, Back to the Future, where you come back and then you restructure the future to your liking. So I just think it is way too early. I don't think that DeSantis is a serious contender for 28, which a lot of people mention because he will be leaving office at the end of this year. He did not do well running against Trump. And it wasn't just that Trump was Trump. He had every opportunity to win. He was tied with Trump at the beginning of 2022. Then these things happened to help Trump, the Mar-a-Lago raid, the idea that the Democrats are coming after him, all of that. But if DeSantis had run a better campaign, I would say, why not him? And he just didn't show, was not, I think he did a brilliant job as governor, does not have the skills to be a party unifier or indeed, sort of someone that people can see as president. So that would be my one, eliminate him. Cruz is probably going to run. So keep that in mind. I don't know where that goes either. Certainly he and Rubio, it would be interesting because, of course, Vance would then be the candidate of the Zionist wing of the. Well, we already know he is going to be anyway, but Cruz, of course, is leaning very heavily into support for Israel and fighting anti-Semitism.
John, can I ask you a follow-up question on this? There's so many people. Everyone says Vance, Rubio, Vance, Rubio, Vance, Rubio, and then there's this. There are a bunch of people online and elsewhere. Our friend Mark Halpern is one of them, who says, "Stop with the Rubio. Rubio's not running. He's not running. He's not running. Cut it. It's a fantasy. He's just not running." Do you think that's the case? I don't know, but I wonder why they're so certain of this.
I honestly don't know, and I think that if circumstances suggested that Rubio had a clear shot, also again contingent on what happens next year. If he and Vance are neck and neck, let's say, or Vance makes a bad mistake. People say, or Rubio has a great moment or something like that. All of this I just don't think anybody should think that Vance is going to walk into the nomination. He won one election on his own in a very red state and pulled, across the finish line by Trump, both in the primary and in the general. And he has shown no particular political skills, as far as I can tell. He hasn't shown like disastrous. He's not Dan Quayle. He hasn't made a disastrous showing as vice president, but he certainly hasn't like covered himself in glory. And the very fact that he isn't at 60% in the polls anymore is an indication that he has not made the most of his vice presidency as a stepping stone. So, nobody should think that this is going to be an easy walk for him. There's no reason for it to be. And there are too many people in America who want to be president to allow that to happen, I would say. Okay. Abe, there was a question about whether I was going to ask this question, but you said you had something interesting to say about it. So this comes out of left field. David Durrett asks, how did the performance and makeup of Alec Guinness as Fagin in David Lean's Oliver Twist, made in 1948, affect your impression of the film today? The depiction of Fagin cannot be ignored. So just quickly to summarize, this is easily the best adaptation, one of the two best adaptations of Dickens' novels ever made, this Oliver Twist. It's a remarkable movie, along with the other one that David Lean made around the same time, of Great Expectations. But Fagin is, of course, a notorious anti-Semitic caricature in Dickens' own work, and is portrayed as such or David Durrett is asking, is it so obviously an anti-Semitic caricature, Alec Guinness's performance, that it is unwatchable today for a general audience? Abe, you said you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I sort of take all of portrayals similar to that, and in literature, and not just in Dickens, Shakespeare, and wherever, in all sorts of places you wouldn't want to come across them. Really, it's just as historical documents, valuable, in understanding things, and I don't sort of get retroactively horrified. Maybe you can't help it on a sensory level when you see big nose makeup and whatever else, but I mean not intellectually. But I like this question because it reminds me of something that does upset me. In a similar vein, which is that when I now watch comedy of any sort, it could be a sitcom, it could be stand-up. Just from the pre-October 7th, pre-anti-Semitic mania phase of that we're in. So, anything from 10 years ago, let's say, something like that. And there were light-hearted jokes playing with Jewish stereotypes. If you watch like The Family Guy or something, where there's very edgy humor, all about. There's a lot of Jewish jokes, black jokes, everything. It upsets me for a different reason, not because I'm offended, but because I look back on that and I think was such a sign of our cultural health that you could make these lighthearted jokes. You could watch Jackie Mason. You could do, and I mourn for that phase, which was a long stretch of popular culture. Now that's what gets me, is that the non-offensive, kind-hearted, well-meaning sort of humor has taken on. This has the events since October 7th have cast a shadow on that.
Can I comment on that? Can I add something to that on that point, Abe? Rachel Brosnahan playing Mrs. Maisel in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is one of the moments that I loved. And there was this sort of, there became this complaint about what people started calling Jew face instead of black face, like non-Jews playing Jews. I thought along your lines, I thought that Rachel Brosnahan, who is not Jewish, playing a visibly Jewish woman, which is different than playing a visibly Jewish man, because a visibly Jewish man, you could put on a yarmulke, you could maybe throw on some payas, whatever, the garb. Playing a visibly Jewish woman from that period in time requires being Jewy, right? It requires entering the character in a way that other portrayals of Jews wouldn't, and it's in a certain setting and a scene and the comedy world and this and that. I thought that was tremendous. I really did. And I loved it. I loved that it happened. I loved that it was Rachel Brosnahan. I loved the decisions that everybody involved made. And I think it's reflecting on what you're saying, I think the reason I love it so much is similar to what you're saying, which is just you can play a Jew and you can, have these portrayals in various different ways. And when you are part of that, you are part of the wider society.
A weird thing happened in the last day or two. And there's a fantasy novel series about set in, I think, a fantasy version of Africa. I think it's called Children of Blood and Bone or something. Is that right?
That's exactly the title.
Okay.
Children of Blood and
So
Bone.
it's been made into a movie by a brilliant black director named Gina Blythe Blackwood. And the author of the book series wrote the screenplay to the movie and had a full-on temper tantrum in social media and elsewhere this week, saying it's the worst experience of her life. She hates the movie. It's terrible. She never wants to hear about it again. She sobbed and wept and all of this. And then the story seems to be that she was upset at the casting of one of the roles by an actress named Amandla Stenberg, who is a light-skinned black woman. And I believe the author of these books believed that all the characters should be dark-skinned black women, and she is therefore having she's trying to destroy the movie, which is coming out next year. And I saw the trailer; it looks terrible. So it looks absolutely awful. Though this director's movies are really, really good. She made The Woman King and a couple of other things with Viola Davis. But I thought like this is now the world in which no one is ever going to be able to do anything. Now that you would have a problem casting Rachel Brosnahan because she's not Jewish in a Jewish role, though that has never been a problem in Hollywood history. Now it's going to be
Ben Kingsley in Schindler's List.
Yeah, or I mean,
he was back in the movie about kidnapping. What's his face? The Nazi in Argentina. Ben Kingsley played an Israeli in that too. I think he pops up.
He played Eichmann. No, he played Eichmann.
He played Eichmann. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
never mind.
That's fine.
So he does both. So that makes playing
Yeah.
Jews even more impressive.
He also played Meyer Lansky, so he's all kinds of Jews. He's noble,
Gandhi, and
but he's noble. He's noble concentration camp Jews, and he's gangster Jews, and all of that. But now we're going to get into this subculture questions. Like you can't cast a secular Jew as a religious Jew, or you can't cast, there was this whole thing about how it was okay to cast Rachel Zegler in West Side Story, playing Maria, who was Puerto Rican because she's half Colombian. And then it's like, wait a minute, what does that have to do with being? It's just because her mother speaks Spanish and people from Puerto Rico speak Spanish. Now Rachel Zegler, is disgusting on Israel, so I hope she never gets work again, even though she's a brilliant singer and that was a brilliant performance. But nonetheless, like we are just getting into this thing where no one is ever going to be able to do anything, and this is play acting. It's play acting. This is what 5-year-olds do. You're supposed to be allowed to play somebody because it's play. It's not, it's not a diorama, it's play acting. I just think it's a very interesting thing. And by the way, in terms of Oliver Twist in that movie, it is not Guinness's brilliant performance is not as Fagin as a Jew. It is Fagin as a pedophile. And that is actually what's most remarkable about it. If you watch it, is this evocation of this guy who is, the leader of this gang of pickpockets in Victorian London, and he is clearly basically there to try to rape them, along with getting money from them. And it's an absolutely chilling performance.
One more note on the Fagin thing, by the way, just real quick, is that this past year, Alison Epstein wrote a very good novel called Fagin the Thief. And it is a retelling of the Fagin story and the Oliver Twist story from the perspective of a Fagin who comes up through the faith. So it's a very interesting, it's good. I enjoyed it far more than I expected. I don't always love those sort of revisionist whatever from this perspective, but if you want the perspective of Fagin and his Jewishness, and how the story might look if you watched it from a young Jewish boy go up and through the plot that
that's Alison Epstein, you said?
Yes.
Alison Epstein, Fagin the
Thief.
Thief. Okay. One question and then a final note. The question that somebody asked is the word goy a slur? Is calling someone goy a slur, does it mean something different from Gentile? So, etymologically, Noam, native Hebrew speaker, Seth, Jew of faith and raised, the word goy means something in Hebrew. Simple, right?
Yes. It means a people, right?
Right, a people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it means. And Loisa goy el goy harev. There are songs like this. There's also the word is used in the Bible to indicate a people. So that being the case, is calling somebody a goy a slur?
I mean, it could be offensive. It's like that saying where the word Jew is not offensive unless you're pointing at someone while saying it.
See, for me, can I just say, because to me, this dovetails into the last question.
Uh-huh.
To me, it's the flip side of seeing the humor with Jewish stereotypes, because the concept of goy in my life has always been, really always, a sort of light-hearted, humorous way of referring to non-Jewishness in terms of like strapping, a sort of like outdoorsman, or someone who's, very good at fixing things. You know what I mean? To me, it has always also fallen into this category of healthy humor. That has always been, like you make fun of someone's goyishness almost almost in a sort of admiring way,
Right.
Also, you should know that goy isn't real. Goy becoming a thing shouldn't really have happened, because in the Bible, the use of the word goy can be used for the Jews also in biblical stories and stuff, because the singular can mean any nation. Goyim meant non-Jews, because if you were talking in a biblical narrative, if you used plural for any sort of nations or civilizations, you were obviously talking about people who were not part of, the sort of Jewish Israelite, whatever you want to call it. And so goyim really, sort of came to mean the world.
Yeah.
Everybody else, everybody who's not here,
right?
And
Everybody
right. And so it's funny that it took on a singular pejorative in that way. I mean, that it is a natural way for words to evolve. It didn't start with the singular.
I have a funny memory. It's like 30 years ago or something. I was eating at Sammy's Romanian on the Lower East Side, Jewishy, kitschy kind of, restaurant. And I was fumbling with the seltzer bottle because they have like the spray.
They had seltzer bottles on the tables at Sammy's Romanian.
Right.
You made your own. You made your own egg cream at the table.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the owner, Stanley, goes, "Hey, goy." And he takes it out of my hand and right. sprays it. That to me, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Quick joke. First, Martian comes down to Earth in a flying saucer. President is there to meet him. Leaders of all countries come to meet him. Flying saucer lands. Door opens up. Out walks this guy. He's about 5'4", tan, kind of gray hair and a pompadour. It's got a golf cap on, wearing a kind of checkered jacket, pinky ring, sunglasses. He says, "Hello there." They're all startled because they figured it would be, like, so you're from Mars. So does everybody on Mars look like you? And he says, "Not the goyim." So that is how Jews. that is sort of it's the not Jewishness, but it isn't not a slur. That's the thing. Like it isn't. If you're being extremely respectful, you would say Gentile. If your effort was to say something totally inoffensive, you would say Gentile. Although, of course,
it's also taken on this offensiveness because of this sort of victim complex of certain people in the frog community on Twitter and other online spaces. Yeah. There's goy slop and things like that. It's one of those things that we don't actually really often use it as a slur, but we use it as jokes. But if somebody on this podcast ever calls you a goy, it will always be affectionately. It will, you never just like pass someone on the street and they have taken it as a pure insult. and adopted it as if Jews use this as a pure insult. And so therefore it has become known as an insult, but not because of the way Jews actually use it.
Yeah, you get called a goy if you ask for mayonnaise on your corned beef sandwich, something like that.
That's a perfect, right. That's right. That's the perfect example. I mean, there are slurs. There are Yiddish slurs of non-Jews. I mean, the biggest one is shiksa, to indicate, which is a non-Jewish woman, and a shiksa is a sort of demeaning or derogatory way to refer to a non-Jewish woman who might be stealing a Jewish boy from a Jewish girl and therefore disrupting the the cultural transmission and heritage of the Jewish people. So shiksa, very much a slur.
But John, even that culturally, over time has developed certain layers of like a reverence, like they talk about Shik's a goddess and,
Yeah, right, yeah. And the Shik's appeal on, of course,
right.
On Elaine having Shik's appeal, which of course is hilarious on Seinfeld because Elaine is Jewish on Seinfeld. They just pretend she's not, just like they pretend George isn't Jew. They're all Jews. All four of them are Jews, but supposedly Elaine and George are not Jews. This was NBC's concession to America, and of course,
and when you meet George's parents,
Elaine based on a Jewish comedian named Elaine Boozler, and played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who was Jewish. So this is a funny little bit.
And George's parents.
Well, George's parents, the Costanzas. Yeah, the Costanzas.
The Costanzas are like one of the most famous Jewish comedy couples ever.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to end on this because we got about 15 different questions at the same question. And it was, where's Christine? What happened to Christine Rosen? Why isn't Christine Rosen on? What happened? Did you have a fight? Was there a fight? People ask it on YouTube. People ask it everywhere. We got 15 questions about this. I said this at the beginning of the month. Or when she told me this, Christine, who was on the podcast for 8 or 9 years, decided that her work schedule in terms of her writing and the things that she had to do as a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and others, that preparing for the podcast on a daily basis was too draining and disruptive for the other things that she had to do that were more central to her work life and the things that she wanted to produce. And so very reluctantly and sadly, she decided that she could no longer be a regular on the podcast. She is still a columnist for Commentary, will be appearing monthly, and she'll come on from time to time, but not only is there no breach, I email her 3 times a week, desperately trying to guilt her into coming back. I did yesterday. I said people are just like, I just got these emails, rafts of emails asking where you are. Doesn't that make you feel guilty? Won't you come back now? And her answer, as would be true of Christine, is, "Oh, that's so nice of them," but she did not take me up on the guilt question. So that is
it was an opening, John, actually, for like a really great fundraising drive or something. So if you ever want to see Christine again, get us to 35,000 subscribers by Rosh Hashanah.
There you go. Okay, you know what? I'll talk to her and see if we can, if she'll be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice of her morning time for that aim. Anyway, so yes, I think we all had a great time doing this episode. It's great to have Noam on. I told you at the beginning he's co-sang with me. He is my nephew, in fact. But this is he's not a nepo baby. He was doing this very job for Tablet for several years and worked for the Middle East Media Research Institute and is a person of great skill and talent, and we're lucky to have him. And in fact, the only thing that kept me from doing this earlier was the question of whether or not it was cricket or kosher or whatever to do this, but we did it anyway, and we're thrilled, and that's very exciting.
And he built an online following under an anonymous handle for a long time. So many people knew him also knew his skills without having any association, aside from the very fun news cycle where he was repeatedly accused of being Ben Shapiro's father.
Yeah. And Noam, you have a podcast of your own.
I do. It's called Ambitious Crossover Attempt. It's a weekly podcast about the intersection of politics and pop culture and such. And thank you, John. You guys are free to check it out where you find your podcasts as well.
There you go. So Ambitious Crossover Attempt. We will be back on Monday. So for Seth and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.